I grew up in a house filled with rescued animals, cats, dogs, and I loved them unconditionally. But then I also loved Burger King. And I loved Stouffer's French bread pepperoni pizza. And it was just so interesting because no one ever questioned it. It almost lived in the same realm as gravity and television and taxes and rainstorms, like things you just don't question. Like, oh, this is the way it is. For me, when I was 19, I finally just had that moment of this is the most normal thing in the world to love animals and to eat them, but it's also the weirdest, wrongest thing. And all of a sudden, I was like, what in the world? Like, how can you care about animals while also contributing to their suffering and death?
What the hell is up, everybody? My name is Jamie Logan, and today I am here with Moby and Lindsay, and Bagel, of course. I have 3 lovely interviewees today, and we're going to be talking all things music, activism, spirituality, sobriety, and I am just so grateful that you guys took the time to spend part of today with me.
I feel very excited and happy to be here with you.
Yes. I mean, everybody knows you guys. I mean, just to give a little general introduction, Moby is an American musician, DJ, producer, and he's an animal rights activist. Lindsay is an actress. She is the head of development at Little Walnut Productions. And so let's just kind of give a general introduction about how we first met. I think it's kind of funny, actually.
Well, I had been familiar with you and your work from the social mediums. And it's a really interesting phenomena when you've seen someone 100 times and you've seen, like in some cases, like I've seen where people live. I've seen them on vacation. I've seen them battling COVID, but I've never met them.
But I had the same experience of meeting you and feeling like, I know you. And then I was like, oh wait, I don't actually know this person. I should probably introduce myself. And I'm so glad that we did, because I feel like we had so much fun that night. We ate so much sushi, vegan sushi from that place that, oh my God, it was so good.
We were at the Vegan Women's Summit, and I was doing some interviews for Jordan from Cave Light, and I went up to Moby and Lindsay, and I saw the tattoo on your neck, and I was like, what does that say? What does that say? And it said vegan for life. And I just remember like ripping your shirt down and like pulling it down.
I remember there was this one person on social media, oh, what was her name? And we'd been following each other for years. And when we met, there was this moment of like, hey, how's it going? And I was like, we've never actually met.
Right.
And so it was a similar thing with you where I was like, oh, I know more about you than I know about my family members.
And then we got to hang out and you came over for dinner.
Yes.
And it's just been so nice. And then I came and I saw you in New York at Zoe Rosenberg's talk. It's been so fun.
It's been so fun. How do you two know each other?
We met, honestly, I think it's just through the vegan mafia world.
And friends. We have a lot of friends in common.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, like in Los Angeles especially, like the vegans we kind of all know each other.
Yeah.
From like restaurants, street fairs, galas, animal save
Vegan
events.
women's summits.
Yeah, so it's really just like I can think of some other people and I'd be like, how do I know them? I don't know, just from years of just being in the animal rights world.
I find that my animal rights friends are the closest people to me because when you share that common passion and belief that all living beings should be free from suffering, when you spend your life and your purpose fighting for them, it's like immediately you just connect with each other.
You either connect, I mean, it's funny because I've been in the animal rights world now for about 35 years, and I have met some of the smartest people. I've met some of the most inspiring people, and I've also met a whole bunch of people who I'm terrified of. Like they're like smart, phenomenal people in the animal rights world, and then there are those people who we've all met on occasion, and they're so unhinged.
Yeah.
You're like, do they want me? Do you want to talk about veganism, or are they going to stab me in the face?
I feel that. There's a range of people, but you find your tribe, you know? You find your tribe a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think what I like to do on my podcast is just to kind of give a general background of where you grew up. I find that our backgrounds play an integral part to leading us towards animal rights activism. And in your case, you came from a hunting family and background in Texas. That is super interesting. So why don't you tell me a little bit about growing up?
I like Lindsay calls them her meat family. Yeah.
My meat family.
Not vegan yet.
Well, yeah, I will say before I say anything that yes, they're my meat family. Yes, they're Texas hunters, barbecue, they're smoking thing. Like, it's a lot. But we recently on our podcast on Moby Pod interviewed Dr. Michael Greger, and he's fantastic. He's so energetic and he's so knowledgeable about all things diet and nutrition and human health across the board. And my parents watched the episode.
You're kidding.
They just recently figured out how to get YouTube to play on their TV in the living room. So now they watch our podcast.
Step ahead of me, but yeah. I
know. And so now they watch it because my dad and they like to feel like I'm there, and they're doing it like they're like, it's like she's really on TV. But they watch the Michael Greger episode.
We should give them like a little NBC sticker they can put in the corner.
I know. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
But they were so impressed with the story. Michael Greger tells the story about his grandmother and how she came back from the brink of death purely by changing her diet. And we talked at length on that episode about the power of a black bean and how it's this like magical food.
I do love a black bean.
Moby loves a black bean and talks about it often. But on this, I think we all spoke about this, but I also got questions from my meat-loving brother about why don't you go plant-based? And I asked Dr. Greger all of these questions and he answered them so knowledgeably. I spoke to my parents the other day and they said they've been moving plant-based. They said they've been eating black beans for lunch and dinner for the first time ever, like making them and having them at home because they realize it's this kind of magical food. Isn't that a big deal?
That's amazing.
I mean, I was shocked. I'm so happy.
Yeah. Well, it just shows the impact that we can all have. And sometimes starting with health intrigues people. And with my family too. It's like my dad was able to reverse his type 2 diabetes by cutting back on the animal products. He's not ethically vegan there yet, but it's a start for sure.
It's a start. It gets you in the door. But something, and I'm totally not answering your question, but now I'm thinking about it, which is my mom. I was like, well, Mom, why don't you just go fully plant-based? And she was like, well, because we have our habits. She was like, I've been making the same things, the same like 5 things on a rotation for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the last 60 years. She was like, it's so hard for me to consider, I don't know how to do anything else than the things I've been doing. And it's very, very hard for her to wrap her head around it. So I think that's the next frontier, is figuring out how to help people make these easy to comprehend shifts in their life. And I don't know how to do that because I feel like we really were trying. But maybe there's something we haven't thought of yet.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Because clearly going to our older parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles and saying like, oh, you really need to start incorporating like maitake mushrooms into your diet. And wakame is a great source of iodine in a plant-based diet. So when you're making your miso soup, you know, perhaps also, you know, fermented food is good. So add some kimchi and tempeh. And at that point, they're either like they've blocked you out, they're punching you in the face, they're rolling up the window, they're doing anything, as opposed to saying, here's what you've been making, here's how with very little effort you can make a vegan version, yeah, which is actually in some cases even easier.
Of something you already know. It's like my grandparents are from the South and my mom as well. And so it's like sometimes the foods that they eat, I can't even comprehend. Like they will have a bagged salad and that's as healthy as it gets.
I mean, yeah, I guess we're still also far away from like, we don't have the vegan version of like deep fried possum or whatever your family.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
I'm assuming, I mean, like in the South, it's like well, we were driving to the Piggly Wiggly and we ran over a possum. That's been feeding us for like the last week.
Oh, man.
Did I just culturally appropriate Southern people?
But I feel like it's
who eat
pretty
possum?
accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's cheap. It's free. That's free dinner, baby.
Yeah. So when you were growing up in the South and you were seeing your family come home with some of these animals, deer, possums maybe, what was going through your head?
Well, I was always, well, at first it was hard for me to comprehend what was going on. I knew I was scared of the stuff that they were bringing in, but I was like, and I would get mad, I would get upset, I would cry. I'd be like, why are you killing the animals? And even when I got older, I remember like wildly yelling at my father that he was a barbarian.
Wow.
Once I learned what that word meant. But, at some point, I think I got really desensitized to it because it wasn't only happening in my home. It was in every single home, every single restaurant was just deer on the wall, ribs on the table. And I just got desensitized to it over time until eventually I was like, wait, what am I doing? This is not just a chunk of question mark, that didn't cause any harm. There's a whole story behind this thing on my plate. And it was something that I never let in until, a certain point in my life. And then everyone thought I was insane.
And I want to get to that it factor, like what that moment was. But before we get there, Moby, like what was that? What was growing up like for you?
Well, I grew up just outside New York. I was born in Harlem, and then I grew up poor white trash in Connecticut. And my family didn't hunt, but we had the same sort of like meat and junk food normalized approach to food that everybody had. And it is that schism, that sort of that cognitive break. And it made so much sense at the time of like, oh, I love animals. I grew up in a house filled with rescued animals, cats, dogs, and I loved them unconditionally. But then I also loved Burger King. And I loved Stouffer's French bread pepperoni pizza. And it was just so interesting because no one ever questioned it. To the point where, it almost lived in the same realm as like gravity and television and taxes and rainstorms, like things you just don't question. Like, oh, this is the way it is. And yeah, and then for me, when I was 19, I finally just had that moment of like, oh, this is the most normal thing in the world to love animals and to eat them, but it's also the weirdest, wrongest thing. So I was 19, I had that all of a sudden, like my brain shifted, like going to the chiropractor, like I got adjusted, and all of a sudden I was like, what in the world? Like, how can you care about animals while also contributing to their suffering and death? And that was 1984. So I went vegetarian in 84 and then vegan in 87.
It's so interesting you say that because I was 19 when I actually made the connection, and it was my dog that helped me make the connection because I realized that what I was doing was othering pigs, cows, chickens, turkeys, fish. I was saying they're not as smart. They're made for this. God put them on earth to be eaten. It's like you other them from the companion animals that you have at home in order to do the things that we do to them.
Or in most people's cases, it's never even questioned. Yeah. Like othering is even like an advanced approach to thinking about it. For most people, it's just like,
this is what you do.
This is...
You put your shoes on? Yeah.
Yeah, you put your shoes on. If it's raining, you acknowledge that it's raining. Like you don't try and change anything. You don't question it. It was just the norm. It was the status quo.
Right. And also, I think for me, it was when I was 13, I saw a pig livestock truck on the highway, and I was sitting in the car with my dog. And up until that point, I didn't question it. Yeah. Up until that point, I just saw food as food. It was inanimate. It wasn't even an animal. I didn't associate it with an animal until I saw that livestock truck filled with pigs. And then throughout the years, I took the more advanced approach, and I was like, oh, well, it's done humanely, it's done quickly, and all these things that I probably wouldn't have wanted done to me, but I said it was okay to do to them. And then ultimately, at 19, it's something about that age.
I was 20.
20? Okay. Yeah, so what was that moment like for you when you just said, I'm done, I'm not eating these products anymore?
Well, the first time, I think I was sheltered from a lot. Like, I didn't know that a woman could be a lesbian until I was 18. I didn't know. I had no idea. I was like, you can do that? No clue.
What about
with
guys?
No,
did you know guys could be gay? Or
The guys could be lesbians?
I knew that men could be gay, but I was like, I guess women just, whatever, they have to figure it out. I had no clue until I was 18 and I met a lesbian in college, and I was like, whoa, I cannot believe you exist. But also, this lesbian was also a vegetarian. And I was like, whoa. My mind was so blown. You can be a lesbian, but you also don't have to eat meat to live? What? And it took me years to kind of process all of this, like, wait, what? How? And like, it was like this little kind of thing in the back of my head. And then the concept came up again, and I was like, I gotta look into this. I gotta look into this. Yeah. And then I found the PETA website when I'm 20 years old in college. And I was like, oh God, you know, the videos, all the, like, I was just like fully, like, earth shattered. And from that point on, I was changed. I had to go figure out how, there was one health food store, and I was like, maybe they'll have something. And then I was at that health food store. It was so tiny. It was like half of this space that we're in right now. But I went there multiple times a week to be like, what is this? What is that? And yeah, that was that journey.
And nowadays in 2024, there's really no excuse. It's so easy. Really, wherever you go, you can find a plant-based option. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to people on the street, it's like this subject of convenience comes up. And the question then becomes, well, is your convenience more important than an animal's life? You know, what is more important? You know, so I mean, it's amazing that, like, I think it requires an individual to step away from their pack of people and to look at everybody and say, no, that's wrong, and I don't want to participate in that. And there's a sense of isolation when, I think, going vegan at first, and then you find other like-minded people. But it does take a little bit of a rebellious attitude.
Yeah.
You know? Speaking of rebellious attitudes, this is a good transition.
I'm so excited to see where this goes.
Where this is going. So take us back to the 80s. You are in, I mean, the punk rock scene, you're partying. Yeah. Paint the picture. What was that like?
Well, they had just invented the train. And yeah, we communicated. There were, you might have seen it in Lord of the Rings. They had mountains with fires on the top of them.
Yes.
So if you want to communicate, you'd go up to the mountain, you'd light a fire.
Roast the little vegan marshmallow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 1987, I guess Ronald Reagan was still president, and the Soviet Union still existed. The World Wide Web was 8 years away. So the most advanced technology was a fax machine, and I didn't know anyone who had a fax machine. I was living in an abandoned factory. I was making, on average, around $2,000 a year. I didn't have a bathroom. So I was very, very broke, and it was an interesting time. But I had been, brought up by hippies, and I had been a philosophy major at college, and I had been a punk rocker, so I was sort of raised with this idea of just question things. Don't accept anything on face value, just question things. And one of the last things I questioned was food. Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, since then, you can apply scrutiny and questioning to everything, but I had never really questioned food because there's that assumption. Like, food is so interesting because self-evidently it's a part of everything, literally and figuratively. It's junk food, but it's also Christmas, it's ritual, it's family, but it's also when you're hungover, you want to gobble these things. So it's like, and it's accepted everywhere. Sometimes people question, like back in the 80s, for example, even now, people question like, oh, too much sodium, too much saturated fat, too much this, but there was never that wholesale questioning of what the food actually was. You were like, well, if it comes wrapped in plastic and the government allows that company to sell it, it has to be okay. Mm-hmm. And when you take a step back and you're like, oh no, not only is it unhealthy, but it's the least ethical thing that humans have ever done, that causes destruction to every single thing it touches. It kills the animals. Sorry, I know I'm stating the obvious, but like kills the animals, destroys human health, destroys communities and workers, destroys the rainforest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then I find that a lot of us get to that point where we're like in 1988, I was like a new vegan, and I was like, all I have to do is tell people the truth, and clearly they'll recognize the truth the way I did, the way you guys did, and they'll change. And I have spent the last 35 years baffled as to why, when people are confronted with the truth, they simply refuse to change. It's the thing, like, because we're all like, at first we're like, am I saying it wrong? Did I not explain to you? Here's what you're eating and here are the consequences of it. And then you're like, okay, what if I yell? What if I throw fake blood on you and tell you? What if I make this documentary? What if I do this? Decades later, no change.
No, I mean, I've even tried dating people just to like convert them to veganism and leave.
What a sacrifice.
I'm taking one for the team.
I thank you for your service.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like I try.
I feel like you're a sparrow. You're like a vegan red sparrow.
Everybody agrees that animals should not be kept in cages, that they should at least have room to roam around. People agree we shouldn't kick an animal walking down the street. Everybody agrees that we should not abuse others. But then when it comes to placing your words into actions, nobody wants to do it.
And the simple fact that if you say to someone like, oh, so you would never hurt an animal. No, of course not. You're horrified by animal suffering. Of course I'm horrified by animal suffering. Can I show you this video of how meat and dairy are produced? No, I can't watch it. I'm like, great. So we all agree. It's that last step of, then why won't your actions change? And I feel like so many of us live in this state of just cognitive, we're baffled. You know, we're like, everybody knows the truth. Why aren't they changing? Like, and also, why do they get so mad at us when all we're doing is saying, liking animals, not wanting to cause suffering is inconsistent with killing animals and causing suffering.
Yeah, I think if it's a hard thing for somebody to grasp, because they're like, but this is how it's always been done. What's next? You're going to tell me we shouldn't live in houses?
You're going to tell me that women should be allowed to vote? Like,
but if it does like come up against some like ingrained belief system, at least in this day and age, you can find a place to prove the thing you want to believe on the World Wide Web, which didn't exist in 1987, but people could still figure out how to do it. And now it's like, you know, I talk to people and they're like, well, yeah, true, but there's like a guy that eats only liver, you know, only raw animal liver, and look at him. I mean, this guy is really healthy. Though I do think that guy's not that healthy anymore. I think something bad happened to that guy. But like there's confirmation bias anywhere you want it to be. So I think like if it does come up against, you don't want to believe it, you don't.
It's like one of my favorite bits of vegan propaganda. I never really watched the show, but someone sent me this clip from Parks and Rec when the Nick Offerman character shows up at a barbecue with a cow.
Alive?
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I think he has a sledgehammer. He's like, I heard you having a barbecue. Let's kill the cow. And everyone's horrified. And you're like, okay, so if you're horrified at killing the cow, why wouldn't you be horrified at someone else killing the cow?
It's so people don't think about it. Like, remember that John Oliver thing that came out recently about pig butchering, which is not killing pigs. It's like when a scammer makes a friendship with you to get you to like give you their card information or whatever, says they'll invest money for you or something. But it's happening all over the place and these people have lost all this money. Anyway, it's called pig butchering because you have to like fatten up the pig, meaning you have to like develop a relationship with the person before you scam them.
Mm-hmm. Betray them.
Yeah, but he has this whole thing of like pig butchering. I know it sounds awful. It sounds like it's going to be something really bad. One thing I hate to tell you, but that is the thing that actually happens to many, many pigs. If it terrifies you, it's real. And then he goes into it and it's like, yeah, people think it's like, oh God, pig butchering, that sounds terrible. And it's like, yeah, but you still eat bacon 5 times a week, you know?
It's an addiction.
Yeah.
And when we look at people with addiction problems, I grew up in a family that had addiction issues, still has. Even when you confront them with the truth, even when you say, I videotaped you last night, look at what you're doing. You completely embarrassed me. I had to pick you up from this place. They don't want to hear it, and they still don't want to admit they have a problem. So when we look at meat, dairy, and egg problems, it's this like addiction to food. It's this addiction to products that they think that they need to survive, that they want to eat because it's convenient, they like the taste of it. I mean, they come up with all sorts of reasons.
You know, there might be, and stop me if I'm being a little too pointless and esoteric, but there is, the only way I can describe it, there's a sort of existential subtext to it. And I can already see people turning off the podcast being like, oh boy, what nonsense
Moby's
is this?
about to go off.
Yeah. But the basic idea that like, we love structure, we love predictability, we love comfort, we love turning on our faucet and having water come out, understandably. We love control. Most of our ancestors had no control over their environment. And now that we have control, people hold on to it. They love control. They love claiming to understand their place in the universe. And so when you go to them and you say, oh, the stuff that you're feeding yourself with is poisonous, it's killing you and it's killing animals, it's terrifying because they're like, oh, and especially now in a world of chaos, people are like, I can't control my job, I can't control my health, I can't control these other things, but I can control ordering McDonald's from Postmates. And you're saying to them, that's actually bad. They're like, that's the last thing I had. They're like, I have doom scrolling on Instagram and TikTok, and I have McDonald's on Postmates. These last bastions of control, and we're saying one of them is wrong. And it's that, no, I don't want to look at it. Please just leave me with this one last thing I can control and don't take that away from me. Because the alternative is the unknown, and nothing terrifies people more than the unknown.
Well, the question becomes, how do we get people to care if they say, well, I'll have a cigarette. I don't really care. I don't really care if I hurt myself, And
Yeah,
well,
gotta go somehow.
Right. The planet's going to die anyway, and unfortunately, the future generations are going to have to deal with it. I mean, people are selfish sometimes.
But I guess it's for example, when I was sober for a long time and then I started drinking and doing drugs, and my rationale was, well, I'm only hurting myself. And so in 1995, when I started drinking and doing drugs again, I was still a vegan because I was like, that hurts other beings, but I can do drugs. And then I realized, oh, well, actually, by drinking and doing drugs, I'm not only hurting myself, I'm hurting my ability to help animals. If I'm hungover until 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm clearly not being of service to anyone. That's why on my little face, I have on one side a V and an X. So it's like vegan first, straight edge second. Meaning the straight edge is sort of like the foundation for activism. If I'm dead or incapacitated or hungover, I'm no good to anyone. What you do to yourself, that's your own business. Right. Have that cigarette, take drugs, hurt yourself, do whatever you want. It's your body, it's your choice, whatever you want to do. The moment your actions impact the rights and will of another sentient being, that's when ethics enter the picture. And the core of ethics from the Code of Hammurabi on, if you're bored, Google the Code of Hammurabi. It's like the first written legal code. That's the basic core of it. You cannot impose your will on another sentient being.
Hammurabi's Code, bringing me back to 9th grade history class.
Jot that note down. I don't even know if we covered that in 9th grade history. I went to public school in Texas, so we didn't really go on.
You're like, in the Bible, it says... Turn to page 17 of your Bible.
I mean, if that, it was more like, color this picture of Jesus every day.
Riding a dinosaur.
Yeah.
So when we talk about then making that connection, having that spiritual awakening, going sober, how does that go hand in hand with veganism? Because I know a lot of people that actually become sober and then actually go vegan shortly after.
For me, and maybe it's relevant for others, it's the idea of being willing to look at the consequence of your actions. Because sobriety, almost so much of what we do is magical thinking and delusional magical thinking. Like the guy who's like, oh, I'm a good person, so if I cheat on my spouse, I'm still a good person. Like, no, you're not. you're cheating on your spouse. That's bad. You know, like, I'm a good person. I steal at work. No, you have to make that kind of, that's unethical. Good people don't do that. Like, or like, I care about my health even though I'm eating Burger King and smoking crystal meth. It's like the statement and the action are very far apart from each other. And sobriety, for me and for a lot of people, is the willingness to say, oh, my actions are inconsistent with my beliefs. And once you do that, it begins a sort of like cognitive cascade, and you start asking yourself, well, in what other ways are my actions inconsistent with my beliefs? You know, like, am I a good person? And if so, why am I lying and cheating? And am I a good person? If so, why am I contributing to the suffering of animals?
That makes a lot of sense. Yes, because I'm like, it seems to go hand in hand for a lot of people. And I think for me, veganism was taking it a step further and just be like, I want to be a kind person. I want to be kind to others. Eating their body parts, taking their secretions from their babies, the milk that's made for their babies, probably not the kindest thing to do. Let me align my values with my actions. So, I mean, that being said, where do you think this idea of extreme comes into play? Like, it's technically just extreme kindness.
I mean, it doesn't make it. It never made any sense to me, especially because when I first went vegan, I was in Texas, and it's so bothered people. Yeah. I think because they felt judged maybe by or thought that I was superior to them because I was making some ethical choice that they weren't. And it bugs people so much. And so I think because they feel possibly judged or something by that, then they lash out by saying what you're doing is crazy. Mm-hmm. You know, classic projecting. You know?
Totally. And I think you've seen this probably throughout your career too. I mean, in '96, you put out an animal rights album. Can you talk about some of the feedback that you got from people?
I mean, there's a lot of what we're talking about. There's sort of like, there's cognitive dissonance, there's moral outrage, there's confusion, but also, as I'm sure we've all as we've all experienced, there's the confusing sadness, because it's one thing to say, oh, those MAGA hat wearing Trump supporters, like, they're eating steak, like, I'm mad at them. What's a lot harder is when we're like, oh, my progressive neighbor is eating In-N-Out burgers. You know, oh, these academics I like, these scientists I like, these environmentalists I like, these progressives, these thoughtful people, these poets, these writers, these musicians, even the people who are like concerned with climate change and health, they're still eating meat and dairy, and you're like, oh, it's so sad. Like, don't they see? So like for example, I mean, since '87 on, it's just been that question of like, oh, I understand why the guy who's going to a monster truck rally and listening to Joe Rogan, like why he might not be inclined to eat black beans and brown rice, but like AOC, you know, like the progressives, like the people who are smart and educated and care about, you know, they claim to be compassionate. That's the hardest. It's since '87, that's always been the hardest one. It's like going to a progressive dinner party in Park Slope and they're eating pig or they're eating foie gras. And I'm like, come on, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's like, you're my people. Why are you contributing to this? You know better. So
yeah, it is so sad to see, because it's like, I trust these people in every way. And by the way, I love monster truck shows.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been to a monster truck show?
I've seen them, but haven't been in person.
I've only watched it on The
Crazy and
Simpsons.
so
They go to Truckosaurus, and it eats the Simpsons car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that does.
Because Homer's looking for parking, can't find parking. He ends up in the middle of the monster truck rally because that's the only place he could find parking.
Crazy.
Then Truckosaurus comes out and eats the car. Please go on.
Anyway, I love a monster truck rally, and I think maybe we should even go to one. I just want to support them. I think that they're great what they're doing. You know, if you're going to get rid of a car, if you're going to smash the car anyway, you might as well do it with a monster truck.
So progressive.
Yeah, exactly. It's recycling. Mm-hmm. But it's been very, very hard. We spoke to a climate scientist named Peter Kalmus, and we were like, what would you say to like the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world? And he said, I don't even worry about those people. The people that I need to change their mind are the people that are so closely aligned to my belief system already, but who aren't making that extra effort to go vegan, to try to find an electric car or ride their bicycle or take public transportation. The people that are aligned in all these ways and they understand it and they agree with it, but they just don't do it. Those are the people that need to be focused on because they're so far along the line. It's just going to take one thing.
And they're our friends.
They're our friends.
Our neighbors.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I don't want to be all tribal, but nonetheless, it's like when someone claims to be compassionate, they care about climate change, they care about health, they even care about animals. I'm like, well, there's a really easy way to address all that. Stop eating meat and dairy.
Yeah.
And they're unwilling to, especially in like LA, Washington, Park Slope, all these places, all these progressives who are eating meat and dairy. And it's just it's like, it's sort of, that's the one that really takes the wind out of my sails.
And don't get me started on regenerative farming.
Oh, gosh.
Don't even get me started.
Do we want to go there? That's the question.
How about, let's just say it's nonsense and
Yes.
let's move on. Because that's like,
That's a bucket of...
There's also a good chance a lot of people don't know what regenerative farming is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Maybe we just say it's a sad bunch of nonsense.
It's just trying to find the right way to kill animals, and there is no right way to do the wrong thing. But the problem is that you have these people of power and influence. We're now in this age of influencers that people will follow and listen to. So you were talking about Liver King earlier. Now we're looking at people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so it's like when people are looking for places to find their information, they're just going to find that confirmation bias. And you have these people that have so much power and that don't do anything with it. They'll just keep promoting their fast fashion. They'll keep promoting just smoking and eating really unhealthy things. That's cool these days. It's like what I admire about both of you so much is you've used your platforms to try and make the world a better place. So being that you are in the entertainment industry, have you found that it's been difficult with PR trying to talk about these pressing issues like animal agriculture?
It's a really interesting question. Wow, I almost can't generalize. Like some people are incredibly receptive. Mm-hmm. Some people are incredibly shut down. Mm-hmm. It's really surprising. Like there's some like right-wing media people who are really open to it, and some left-wing people who are really shut down. Mm-hmm. It's just surprising. Like allies are not where you'd expect them, mm-hmm. but they're also not where you would expect them. Mm-hmm. So it's just confusing. But my approach, I mean, obviously there were years and decades where I was incredibly selfish. I was drinking, I was doing drugs, I was being stupid. I was just looking out for myself. And then I got sober. And I remember, and I've talked about this before, so I'm sorry, Lindsay, I'm going to repeat myself.
I love your stories.
I'm an old person, I repeat myself. I'm like the old guy at the bus stop. He's like, I'll ever tell you about the time I went... Yeah.
But then you
like,
discover
yeah,
new pieces of information in the story. That's what I find when I retell stories. I'm like, oh wait, I forgot about that.
And I forget stuff sometimes. It's honestly, it might be new to me just because I forgot
Hit
it.
us with your story. Let's see what we discover.
Okay. What were we talking about?
You were at the bus stop. You were...
I actually don't remember what the point was. I completely lost my train of thought. So we were talking about media.
Yes. And how, when you go to speak out about a certain subject matter and you're in the public eye, is there ever a worry that speaking about animal rights?
Okay, so I got sober in 2008. And I'd been a vegan, obviously, for a long time before that. I never questioned it. And then I got sober and I started going to AA meetings. And all these old-timey alcoholics, they would say, like, the key to being happy and healthy is being of service. And I got mad. I was like, no, it's not. The key to being happy and healthy is being selfish. Is like
being vegan.
Or the key to being happy is look after me. I'm selfish. I want to look after me. And I read an interview with the Dalai Lama, and then I got to hang out with the Dalai Lama. Good name dropping.
Name drop.
And he was talking about being of service. And I was like, I don't want to be of service. I want to be of service to me. We live in a selfish world. I want to look after me. But they sort of planted these seeds of the idea of service. And it can't be arbitrary service. It has to be rational service. And as time has passed, I've recognized the culture of selfishness that we live in, that we're surrounded by, it doesn't benefit anyone. Like I've been around the people who are selfish, they're miserable. You know, they're desperately looking for the next hit, whatever that might be, whether it's social media likes, whether it's drugs, whether it's cheating on someone, who knows what. They're looking for that external validation, that external hit, and it makes them crazy. And it makes them angry. It makes them bitter. It's the people who actually are being of service who are living healthy, sustainable lives. So it's a paradox that the more you're willing to be of service, the more you actually benefit yourself.
Have you heard the quote that the most selfish thing you can do is to be selfless? Think about that.
I mean, in a way, the thing you can do that can benefit yourself the most is to be selfless.
That's what I'm saying.
So, and what I've found is something has happened over time where on an almost molecular level, I've just been oriented to be like, okay, 1 trillion animals are killed by humans every year. That is more important than me. You know, that quantitatively, qualitatively is more important than me and my concerns. So it becomes very easy to sort of disregard me and my concerns. I'm like, oh, what can I do to change the status quo? And that, it just becomes a sort of no-brainer in a way. Like, why, like I could be selfish, but like it seems kind of both boring and trite and unimportant when compared to trying to change a status quo that leads to the death of 1 trillion animals every year.
That makes a lot of sense. I think, you know, when we look at how we treat others, ultimately what we do to others comes back to us. And that's what, you know, it means to me that when we're helping others, when we're being kind to others, and also not seeking all these, like, you know, people going on yachts and thinking that all these outside sources create happiness. And it's like, it's so...
And a lot of people, luckily, well, one thing I'm grateful for, and I imagine you guys, you grew up in New York, you've been around all sorts of fancy people.
I met fancy people sometimes.
But like, I grew up poor white trash in Connecticut, but in a very affluent town. I lived in Manhattan for a long time. I live in Los Angeles. I've been around rich, famous people. None of them are happy. Like the people, like the billionaires. I went to one of my favorite stories. I went to a birthday party in New York about maybe 17 years ago, for one of the LaFracs, if you know LaFrac, real estate development.
Yeah.
Went to his birthday party. They rented the Hammerstein Ballroom. They had Earth, Wind, and Fire play. Everybody was there. Trump was there, Michael Bloomberg was there, Steve Schwartzman, all the New York billionaires were there. No one was smiling. No one was happy. No one was having fun. Earth, Wind, and Fire started playing, and like the billionaires got up and kind of shuffled around. And at one point I looked over at the kitchen staff and they were laughing and dancing and having the best time. And I was like, okay, there's Trump and Bloomberg and Steve Schwartzman and LaFrac and all these billionaires. None of them are smiling. None of them are happy. The kitchen staff are having a great time. Why are these billionaires making such an effort to be captains of the world when they're miserable? Like, so it makes it kind of easy to dismiss those materialist aspirations when you've been around it and you realize no one's actually happy.
I love that you said that. And I've, in the past couple years, taken on, I mentioned to you when I saw you, I do Jivamukti yoga, and I've taken on this spiritual path of just trying to like figure out who we really are and why we're here. And it's actually created like a whole 360 transformation for me.
180.
Oh, 180.
Someone corrected me recently.
Thank you.
I said I made it
360 is when you get back to where you started.
Yeah, 360. You're actually right back where you started.
Oh my
180 is
gosh!
the other end of the thing.
How many times have I said 360
I
transformation?
said it just recently and someone corrected me, so I'm sorry for being pedantic. I'm paying it forward.
Okay, well, yes, now I'm on the 180 side of things. And, you know, you just start to see the world in a very different way. It's kind of like that awakening that you have when you go vegan. You stop seeing animals as food and your whole world changes and you start to question things. And so for me, it's like, there's so much more to life than just the material things. And when we can act every single day in alignment with our values, our morals, and uplift the lives of others, those are the happiest people, are the ones who uplift the lives of others.
So that, Lindsay, by the way, I apologize. I've been rambling on, and when Jamie asked that question, it was to both of us, and I answered, so I'd like to hear your answer.
Oh, about media and
Platform
plant-based?
and-
Well, as far as like social platforms, I put less attention there, but I will say I've worked in production and television for years, and something that I always notice is that talking about plant-based, vegan, any of that is kind of a non-starter when it comes to these bigger, like anyone that would purchase a concept to be developed or produced. It's a non-starter. People don't want to hear about it because all of these networks are terrified that they're going to shut down, or the executives are afraid they're going to get fired or whatever. And it's too risky because they know that a lot of people don't want to be confronted with these things when they just want to watch Junior Cookie Baking Championship. You know what I mean? Right. They don't want to have their entire way of existing questioned.
Is Junior Cookie Baking Championship a real thing?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I thought you just made that up. And
Nope, that's real. That is real. Pumpkin Carving Championship International. That's real. I have friends that did that show. So like that's what they want to watch.
Yeah.
They don't want to be challenged, not really, and not in any like straightforward way like that. You have to, and that's I think what we've been trying to figure out with Little Walnut is how do we get a little bit crafty of how we tell stories that get people to question the status quo that we've been talking about, like hiding the broccoli in the milkshake, of like how do you get something in front of people where they don't realize they've actually just consumed vegan propaganda?
Yes. Or vegan food. It's about normalizing it and changing people's mindset about veganism from a loss or something that's being taken away from them to something that they're actually gaining, or just something that's being replaced. So like, I like to tell people all the time, I can have everything from the creamiest of ice creams to the heartiest of burgers. There's no sacrifice. The only thing that's missing is the cruelty and the suffering. Yeah. So if we can do that through media and through production companies like Little Walnut, and show people that there's a family at Thanksgiving and they're having a big, giant, delicious meal, and there's no dead bird on the table, and you don't even have to talk about it. It's completely normalized that there's a big slab of tofu and everybody's loving it and enjoying it.
And we don't even have to talk about it.
But that's there, yeah.
Like we can make a movie where there's a box of cereal on the table with a really cool box, and we don't have to say, what delicious vegan cereal. People can be like, oh, that box looks really cool. What was the name of that? I want to look that up because that box is interesting. And then suddenly they're ordering vegan cereal and they don't even realize that they've done it. Like that's, I think, what the goal is, to show people existing. The media is so powerful. We talk about this all the time. Sorry. Now I'm telling things you've heard a bazillion times. But like, I always come back to the example of Will and Grace.
Yes.
And how would we have gotten so far in like marriage equality in that battle if it wasn't for normalizing the gays on TV, on primetime television? Would we have had it? I don't know. It was a lot of people's first time seeing a gay person be openly gay. And it was right there in their living room. And I think, and the gays were funny and lovable and just so wonderful in so many ways, principled, and on these journeys, feeling feelings. And they think they got to know these people and see them as humans. And it made them be like, you know what? They're not so bad. Yeah. And then suddenly, a few years later, we have marriage equality.
And suddenly,
I think not.
We're all now coming out.
Yeah. And now,
here we are. Okay.
I think the really interesting point is the emotional aspect of that. Meaning, like in 12-step programs, they talk about attraction, not promotion. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, let's go back to the days before Will and Grace. Like, there were some really interesting, edgy organizations like ACT UP, who are like very challenging, very aggressive. And like, kudos to them for being brave, but like, for example, going to someone and being like, oh, I'm a vegan. If you don't agree with me, you're bad. Like, there's a good chance that person's going to be defensive. And if you go to them and say, look, you've got very attractive people, I'm not including myself, who are like
Bagel.
serving delicious food and living healthy lives. That's attraction. That's people being like, oh, the same way with Will and Grace. It's like, oh, the gays are funny. The gays
they're having
are
so much
sweet.
fun.
The gays are like it. People are like, oh, why would I be a bigot when it's the people on Will and Grace who I love? The same way, like, why would I be anti-vegan when, like, look, the vegans have cute animals and they're rescuing adorable baby pigs and they're eating food that has color and they're healthy and they're attractive and they're, so that's that aspect of it, the attraction part. Like, how do you Will and Grace veganism? How do you make it attractive? Didactic, sometimes didactic works. Like if there's like a 15-year-old kid in his bedroom listening to speed metal, you might want to be didactic and say like, hey, dude, go vegan. He's like, yeah, that's what I respond to. But like for everybody else, like give them delicious food and attractive people. And they're like, oh, I think I want to be a part of that.
On whatever level, one by one, if you're you. But maybe
the way you're like, I don't like you, but I'll date you just on the off chance you might turn vegan. Yeah.
And she is exhausted.
Very tiring. Listen, whatever it takes for the animals, different approaches for different people. But when we look at Little Walnut, can you just tell me, you were on a hike one day and you were both looking at each other and you're like, we really want to find a way to make the biggest impact possible with the time that we have here on this planet. So Little Walnut was founded and you've created amazing projects, punk rock vegan film. I mean, the animations that you have are incredible. Everybody, please go watch these animations. They're life-changing, especially for me. I was like, wow, this is just such a way to look at how we're destroying the earth and the planet and creative. So tell me about the start of Little Walnut.
Well, you remember, and some people might not remember this, a couple of years ago, there was a global pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I recall.
It was like Y2K, but similar sort of thing. So during this pandemic, I'm using the air quotes to mock people who would use air quotes around pandemic. Lindsay and I were hiking. Lindsay had just been put on furlough, and she was talking about how she wanted to work in media, work in entertainment, but to do something meaningful. And I was like, well, me too. And I have a production company that I'm not doing anything with. Why don't you come run the production company? And the idea every day is like, use our resources, use our connections to go out into the world and move the needle, and like to make music videos, to make animation, to support other people's movies, to make our own, to make short films, to make a podcast, to do anything. It's just this question of like, every day, 7 days a week, go out there and push against the needle to move it away from where it currently is.
Amazing. And talk about the project that you're working on now.
Ooh, it's a very fun one. Oh, Bagel. She just woke up from her little nap. She's a very tired person. So right now we are making a feature film that Moby wrote. A scripted feature that Moby wrote. It's a tragic love story that takes place in the animal rights community in Los Angeles. And we start shooting very soon. We have two amazing leads. We have Mina Massoud and Sarah Jeffrey. Yeah, Aladdin, live action Aladdin. And Sarah Jeffrey, who is so fantastic. And they are both incredibly committed animal activists in their own personal lives.
The director is Mark Webber, who's also a vegan animal rights activist. His wife, Teresa, is one of the producers. She's also a vegan animal rights activist.
Many of our actors are vegan. Many of our crew is vegan. All of our sets are entirely vegan and eco-friendly. It's very exciting. And all of these vegans that we've hired to come act or work on the project in whatever capacity are all just like, I've never been on a set where I could eat anything. Yeah. I've never been on a set where I don't have to go out of my way or bring my own food or just trying to like eat while I'm working. It's this novel thing to them that I've never experienced it before. So that's wonderful that behind the scenes we are living the life that we are getting to portray on screen, and we're all very, very excited.
And what is the hope or the goal with this movie or this message when it reaches the public?
Well, the movie is called Tessie. And TECIE, and it's an acronym, and I can't tell anyone what the acronym stands for until the movie's done, because it's a big reveal what the acronym is.
So you got to watch it to find out.
You won't figure it out. Trust me. A friend of mine spent months trying to figure it out, and I was like, "No, I promise you won't figure." I mean, not in any way to demean your ability. I'm just saying, like, it's such an obscure acronym.
Yeah. I'm already having trouble thinking of words that start with T, so it's not going well.
Tooth.
Yeah.
So
tooth idiots.
yeah.
Control internet extremism.
Yeah. So that's the movie.
So sometimes, as you know, we'll watch a movie, and at the end it'll say, like, no animals were harmed during the making of this movie. And it sort of begs the question, what about catering?
That's absolutely true.
And so our catering, our craft services, like Lindsay was saying, it's all 100% vegan. The wardrobe is vegan. Hair, makeup, everything vegan. Like our tattoo artist is vegan. Like we want it to be consistent. And to your question about what the goal is to make a beautiful, scripted, emotional, story-filled, youth-oriented movie that is completely unapologetic. Because it's not just about animal rights and veganism, it's about our current culture, because our culture is we've been talking about this, our culture is so filled with fear and compromise and selfishness. And the heroes of the movie, they're activists. They're gorgeous, they're young, they're sexy, but they're committed activists.
So highly principled and so loud about it.
And so my hope is that people watch it and they're like, yes, that's the way people should be. You know, the world should not be mealy-mouthed celebrities lying so that you'll buy their beauty products. It should be about, like, I've got a platform, I'm going to use it to address important issues, as opposed to this culture of just, like, selfish garbage fear that we live in.
I am so excited to see this, because that is the world that I want to live in. That is the world I want to see. So very exciting. And, you know, I think maybe it'll inspire people to get loud themselves and to speak up themselves, because the people are going vegan, they're going plant-based, but you have these people that are still very shy to speak up about it. So how can we inspire them to use their voice, and use their voice in a way that makes sense for them? You know, you being an artist, writing songs about animal rights, writing characters and scripts.
It's doing everything.
Everything helps.
And it's tricky, because on one hand, we don't want to judge other people, like other people have different circumstances, but at the same time, the stakes are too high to sit on the sidelines. The stakes are too high to just be like, oh, well, I'll try and make some money, and then maybe I'll be able to get my second house, and maybe I'll be able to do this. It's like, you do know the world is collapsing and there are 1 trillion animals being killed. Like, nothing is more important than dealing with those two things.
But also, it seems like such a gift to be able to give to people. I feel every day the gratitude of, like, nobody had to die for me to be alive today. Like, what a gift that is, to get to live every day, like the karma of it, the knowing that I made very easy choices. No animals.
Lindsay is kind of a serial killer.
Oh, okay. That'll be podcast part 2.
Podcast 2 is like, just come visit the backyard at her house and be like, wow, what fertilizer do you use? You're like,
Lindsay!
That's Jeff. No.
He worked at the gas station. He was eating beef jerky. No longer.
Totally outing you right now.
No, I have not gotten into serial killing yet. But you know,
life goals.
Who knows? I never say never. But I do love the idea of getting to work every day to give people the gift of living a compassionate life. Because I think when you start caring about the world outside of you, the way that you view yourself, the light that you view yourself within, completely changes as well. When you start to say, my choices matter. I matter. Whoa, like, you know, that starts to get into your skin in a much deeper way than just, I'm vegan, I don't eat meat. It's so much deeper than that. And I think then you start seeing everything in the way of, like, how can I be kinder here? How can I be more compassionate to myself in ways that I haven't been? Or, you know, how can I make sure that Bagel gets the most perfect treats?
Of course.
so that she lives the best life she possibly can, or the people around me. You know, I think it's such a beautiful thing for yourself and for the world. And I think giving people the gift of what that feels like, or the opportunity to make that choice, or to know about it, or see it in a different way than they had before, feels like a kind of imperative.
But you know what feeling that then creates for us is happiness. It's a circle. It's like it creates that happiness. So what's next?
I hate touring. I love playing music, but I'm happy to like sit in my backyard and eat vegan pizza and play songs on acoustic guitar. Like that's my ideal way of playing music and touring. My manager tricked me because for years he's been trying to get me to go on tour. And I just never wanted to be like another middle-aged musician on tour, like trying to make more money. Like it's just, there's like, why? Like life is short, like why do that? Especially when there's so many people already doing that. I don't want to criticize them. Maybe they have good reasons, but I'm like, I don't want to sit in airports and sit on buses and sit in parking lots doing the same thing I was doing 25, 30 years ago. My manager tricked me by saying, okay, what if you go on tour and give all your money to animals, animal rights organizations? And I was like, yep, that's what I have to do. So the tour, everybody else on tour gets paid, but all my, whatever money I'll make will go to animal rights organizations.
Incredible. How do you decide where the money goes?
Research, asking. So it's a European tour. And so we've picked animal rights organizations in the countries that we're going to.
Like, do you focus on cultivated meat? Do you focus on sanctuaries? Like, where can we have the biggest impact?
It's a great question. I love sanctuaries, but there's so many of them. It's very hard to support. I mean, I don't know. Sanctuaries are phenomenal, and I applaud the people who run them, but there are thousands of them. And it's like, how do you support all of them? So I still haven't figured that one out. The world of cultured meat, like I do that, or like alternative clean meat and proteins. I do that through venture capital. Like there's a bunch of venture capital firms I work with. So it's not really philanthropy. It's more investing with philanthropic goals. Boy, all of a sudden I do sound like a guy from Connecticut, huh? Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like an asset class, Jamie, let me tell you.
I'm taking notes.
My name's Rick. I'm from Darien, Connecticut. And so I'm looking like a diversified portfolio. You know, like a diversified portfolio, you have to incorporate a sort of philanthropic modality, Jamie.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
bear with me, little lady.
You lost
nauseous.
me. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any idea.
I have no idea.
To me, you're just going, whoa, 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 whoa.
It's like the grown-ups in Peanuts.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyway, so in terms of the charitable organizations, I did a lot of research, I asked around, and we found the ones in every country who seemed to be the most effective. But then again, I could be missing some. I could have picked, I don't know. I did my best research. I hope I picked good organizations.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, because everybody has their own idea of like what can we do as a movement, and money is essential to moving this needle. I mean, we need to bring the influencers, the powerhouses of the world, the people with money into this movement, because we only have a tiny little sector of money coming to animals, let alone farmed animals. It's absurd. Well, I am so grateful for your time. You're in the middle of creating a movie and you spent an hour with me, so thank you so much. This was so fun. Just please.
I have a question for you. What do you have on the horizon that involves ridiculous costumes?
Oh,
More
I'm
costumes,
so glad
more
you
costumes.
asked. Okay, well, Tofu Day is coming up. So I really want to. Yeah. I was a potato a few weeks ago, which went really well on the low. It did have the skin on it.
Good,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that.
I wish it had a little bit more shape to it, honestly, but people got they got the point.
So the tofu, like the Justin Timberlake SNL
Yes,
sketch.
I want to do a block. Pickle Day passed, and I'm so devastated because I wanted to be a pickle. There's
You can be a
always
pickle whenever you want.
there's always costumes. I do want to do the Lone Star Tick again and dress up as the tick.
Tick was
Yeah,
pretty.
the tick was pretty fantastic.
So you not to end on a non-PG-13 note, but someone sent this to me recently that there was a vegan license plate that got rejected. I think in New Hampshire or Maine.
Okay.
And it was very innocent vegan license plate that I guess might have had, in contemporary parlance, might have meant something different. It was I heart tofu.
Oh, I got it. 2F you.
Yeah. So the DMV rejected it because they didn't think it was tofu. They thought they were talking about grown-up interaction.
Oh, no.
Sick people. That's on the DMV.
They
I'm
got
gonna
their
say.
mind in the gutter.
Well, listen, if you have any ideas for some future costumes, send
I'm
them
just
my
saying,
way.
like tofu with like the license plate, the I Heart Tofu might be funny.
That's a
That's
great
a
idea.
conversation starter.
Okay, I think we know what our next thing, our next activism is. Well, where can people find you?
Big O.
I'm on Instagram at Lindsay Hicks.
Moby at Moby.com, and go listen to the Moby Pod. You guys have some great episodes on there. And until next time, guys, I'm at It's Jamie's Corner, and we'll see you around. Bye. Yay!
It's Jamie's
Yeah.